You must have seen the TikToks about Mark Zuckerberg's $270 million Hawaiian fortress with the blast-resistant doors. But what if that whole tropical mega bunker is just a smokescreen? Because while the media is distracted by Hawaii, the tech elites who actually know what's coming have quietly vanished into a secret valley in Montana. We're talking anonymous shell companies swallowing up thousands of acres of ranch land and elite Swiss engineering crews drilling multi-million-dollar bunkers 50 feet into the dirt. So, what do the world's most powerful minds know about the future that you don't? And what exactly are they building beneath the Montana earth? Strap in as we take a insider look in this video. Why Hawaii is the decoy and Montana is the real deal. There is a very specific reason why the world's most sophisticated survivalists aren't actually building their permanent doomsday fortresses in Hawaii. And no, it has absolutely nothing to do with the weather. By now, everyone's seen the headlines about Mark Zuckerberg's 1,400-acre tropical estate in Kauai. The mainstream media went crazy over the details. The $270 million price tag, the sci-fi-style underground bunker, the disc-shaped tree houses, and the ironclad NDAs binding every local contractor to absolute secrecy. It makes for great clickbait. But it also generated exactly the kind of loud, global spotlight that makes serious people in serious rooms take one look, shake their heads, and quietly choose somewhere else entirely. Because if you're actually planning for long-term survival, an island is a terrible strategy. Think about it. An island has finite resources. You are 100% dependent on maritime supply chains for literally everything you cannot grow or weld yourself. Worse, from a tactical standpoint, an island is a geographic trap. Every single approach is completely visible, and your exits are fundamentally limited. Add in the massive political headache of building ultra-luxury mega-compounds on contested indigenous land, and Hawaii becomes a public relations nightmare. If your goal is to disappear when things go sideways, generating endless public controversy is a massive failure. But Montana's Paradise Valley? That offers something completely different. And the elites assembling empires there know exactly what they're doing. First of all, Paradise Valley gives you a 300-mile deep continental interior with direct access to the entire American landmass. No ocean traps here. It gives you vast, unzoned spaces where local government oversight is so fragmented it's easily managed. It gives you raw natural resources in quantities that make true self-sufficiency a reality, not just a textbook theory. And the legal environment? It's a billionaire's dream. The privacy laws and land control instruments in Montana are so aggressively protective that serious wealth can buy up entire mountainsides and operate for decades without a single public record ever connecting a real name to a real acre. Geographically, the valley is a masterpiece. Cut by the Yellowstone River, flanked by the towering Absaroka Range to the east and the Gallatin Range to the west, it sits right at the northern gateway of Yellowstone National Park. It is, honestly, one of the most jaw-dropping landscapes in America. But for the survivalist elite, the postcard views are completely secondary. They are here for the regulatory freedom, the resource depth, and a hyper-sophisticated legal loop that allows them to secretly assemble private kingdoms. Now, to understand why this specific valley has become the ultimate playground for the billionaire prepper class, you have to understand the invisible legal machinery making it happen. And trust me, it is a lot more calculated than you think. The invisible buyers. How billionaires erase themselves from the map. Here's the first thing you need to understand about how serious money acquires land in Paradise Valley. It never buys anything in its own name. Not once, not ever, not even for a small parcel where the identity of the buyer would seem inconsequential. The anonymity isn't incidental to the strategy. It is the strategy, and the legal architecture supporting it is genuinely elegant in its construction. The primary vehicle is what practitioners call the Montana LLC loop, a structure in which high-value land assets are held and registered through passive, non-revenue-generating limited liability companies that are specifically designed to hold assets rather than conduct business. Because Montana law allows these entities to operate with minimal public disclosure of their ultimate beneficial owners, a billionaire can establish a holding company, give it an unremarkable name that tells you nothing about who controls it, and begin purchasing adjacent ranch properties one parcel at a time without any public record connecting the transactions to a single individual or strategy. The sophistication deepens when you look at the jurisdictional layering that supplements the Montana LLC structure. Wyoming, Delaware, and New Mexico LLCs and trusts are commonly stacked on top of Montana, holding companies specifically because those states have the weakest public disclosure requirements in the country, in some cases requiring literally no identification of beneficial owners in public records. A single land acquisition might route through 3 or 4 of these jurisdictions before it reaches the actual buyer, creating a documentary trail that requires significant legal resources to follow, and that most county recorders and local journalists simply don't have the capacity to trace. Family offices, private wealth management entities that serve ultra-high net worth individuals, provide the operational layer that coordinates the purchases, manages the holding companies, and ensures that the timing and sequencing of acquisitions doesn't trigger the kind of local awareness that would drive up prices before the assembly is complete. Firms like Paul Dodge McCoy Family Office Services specialize in exactly this kind of discrete land accumulation work, managing the process with the systematic precision of a corporate acquisition strategy applied to agricultural real estate in a valley where most sellers are ranching families who have no idea they're selling to someone with a 9-figure net worth and a 20-year land consolidation plan. The objective of all this sophisticated anonymity is what local activists have started calling Fortress Yellowstone. The systematic assembly of contiguous private properties that effectively surround and bisect public lands, transforming theoretically accessible federal territory into de facto private fiefdoms where no trespassing signs appear on established county roads and gates materialize across routes that the public has used for generations. Montana law technically prohibits the obstruction of public roads, but the fine for illegally blocking a county road under Montana Code, annotated 714-2136, is $10 per day. A sum so trivially irrelevant to the people doing the blocking that it functions as a cheap administrative fee rather than a meaningful deterrent. When your land assembly costs hundreds of millions of dollars, $10 a day is not a compliance problem. It's a rounding error. The land grab in numbers. What Paradise Valley actually costs? Before getting into what's being built beneath this land, it's worth spending a moment on what the land itself costs, because the economics of Paradise Valley real estate illuminate both the scale of investment happening here and the cascading consequences it's generating for the people who actually grew up in this valley and are watching it transform around them. The market for undeveloped land in Park County runs from approximately $10,000 per acre on the lower end for larger parcels with development potential, to over $67,000 per acre for smaller, high-value recreational parcels near landmark destinations like Chico Hot Springs. A 237-acre tract with extensive mountain views recently listed at $5.5 million, roughly $23,000 per acre. An 89-acre parcel bordering the Seuss Creek zoning district, which carries the privacy premium of proximity to established elite enclaves, listed at over $45,000 per acre. A 10-acre parcel with sweeping mountain views near Livingston, recently listed at $47,000 per acre. Now do the math on what serious land assembly costs at those prices. Jamie Galinsky's Indian Creek consolidation of 5 properties cost approximately $80 million in the context of Miami real estate. In Paradise Valley, assembling a comparable 5,000-acre contiguous empire at even $20,000 per acre means a $100 million land investment before a single structure goes in the ground. At the scale of the largest assemblies happening here, tens of thousands of acres, the investment is measured in the hundreds of millions, all of it flowing through anonymous holding companies into a valley that had no reliable mechanism to know it was happening until the gates started appearing on roads that had always been open. Russell Gordy consolidated several smaller properties into a 44,000-acre private state here and sued his neighbors to block a proposed wind farm on the grounds that it would industrialize the natural beauty of the valley. Capital he accumulated through aggressive fossil fuel extraction, including fracking shale gas, drilling coalbed methane, and collecting royalties from a major coal mine, now being deployed to protect his Montana pastoral experience from industrial intrusion. Arthur Blank, co-founder of Home Depot, added the 9,540-acre Paradise Valley Ranch to existing holdings and place substantial portions under conservation easements preserving Elk Winter Range. Wealth generated through a company that environmental groups have consistently targeted for driving old-growth logging and tropical forest degradation, now funding local conservation. The Cargill-Macmillan family, heirs to one of the world's largest agribusiness conglomerates, linked to hundreds of square miles of Amazon deforestation, have spent millions conserving local spring creeks to protect native Yellowstone cutthroat trout. The pattern across these examples is consistent enough to have earned its own label among local critics: greenwashing elite sanctuaries. Conservation easements that yield massive federal tax write-offs while ensuring the landowner's views and privacy are legally protected in perpetuity. Local environmentalism funded by industries that are environmentally catastrophic at scale. The ranch becomes a preserved wilderness the moment it's purchased by the right buyer, which happens to be the same moment it becomes inaccessible to the public that had been using it for generations. The road wars. Public land that isn't public anymore. The conflict between Paradise Valley's new owners and the public's historic access to land in and around the valley has escalated from a local dispute into a series of legal battles with national implications. And understanding those battles is essential to understanding what the land assembly is actually designed to achieve. The corner-crossing conflict is the most technically interesting of these disputes, and it illustrates with unusual precision how legal weaponry gets deployed to convert a technical argument into a massive practical land grab. In the checkerboard land patterns that characterize much of Montana's public-private land mosaic, where public and private sections alternate in a grid pattern like a chessboard, the public has historically moved diagonally from one public parcel to the next at the exact point where the corners of four properties meet, a maneuver that involves passing through the private airspace above those corners without touching private ground. Elite landowners began arguing that this diagonal passage constitutes civil trespass, a claim that, if upheld broadly, would effectively lock up an additional 871,000 acres of public land in Montana alone by making access to landlocked public parcels legally impossible. Backcountry hunters and anglers and the Public Land and Water Access Association filed lawsuits challenging these claims, eventually securing a significant 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, ruling that landowners cannot block access to federal land when hunters cross corners without touching private ground. The ruling was an important win for public access, but the underlying tactic, using expensive, prolonged litigation to deter ordinary people from exercising legal rights they technically possess, remains effective regardless of how individual cases resolve, because most people who want to go hiking don't have litigation budgets. In Meager County, the Tenderfoot Road closure saw county commissioners allow a public road to be gated by private interests, a move a state judge subsequently ruled unlawful on the grounds that commissioners have no authority to permit man-made obstructions on county roads regardless of maintenance history. In Teton County, the closure of Bodle Road highlighted how vulnerable rural transportation infrastructure is to challenges from wealthy private landowners who can sustain legal battles that county governments simply cannot afford to fight at the same intensity. The Wilkes brothers, among Montana's largest landowners, have moved aggressively to block public access to the Durfee Hills, Federal Bureau of Land Management territory landlocked within their private ranch boundaries, effectively privatizing some of the finest elk hunting grounds in the state. The Yellowstone Club, the ultra-exclusive enclave in Big Sky, whose membership roster reads like a Billionaires directory, has repeatedly leveraged strategic land swaps with the U.S. Forest Service to consolidate its holdings, trading roughly 6,000 acres of public land for 3,000 acres of private land in one transaction, 558 acres for 500 acres in another. Each exchange tightening the perimeter of exclusive private control and discouraging public visitation to previously accessible terrain, while enhancing the value of club members' holdings. The one genuine counter-narrative in all of this is the American Prairie Reserve, a nonprofit that recently acquired the 22,000-acre Anchor Ranch, which had historically blocked a 3.8-mile access road to the Upper Missouri Breaks National Monument, and immediately opened Bullwhacker Road, returning public access to a massive national monument that private ownership had effectively sealed off. It's a meaningful example in the opposite direction, but it stands out precisely because it's the exception rather than the pattern. Beneath the ranch, the bunker as a business model. Now we get to what's actually being built under all this carefully assembled, legally protected, anonymously acquired Montana land. And this is where the story moves from a real estate narrative into something that reads more like a James Bond film treatment, except the clients are real and the invoices are larger. The luxury survival industry has undergone a fundamental transformation in the past decade, moving from what were essentially upgraded storm shelters to what the industry now calls the bunker as a business model. Subterranean structures that combine military-grade blast and ballistic engineering with the spatial standards and aesthetic philosophy of five-star hospitality. These are not places designed to keep you alive during an emergency. They are places designed to keep you living exactly as you live above ground, indefinitely, while the surface world handles whatever it needs to handle without your participation. At the apex of this industry sits Oppidum, a Swiss-led ultra-premium shelter builder that constructs bespoke underground residences directly beneath clients' existing estates. Their flagship model, the Heritage, descends 49 feet below the surface and covers 10,760 square feet, constructed using high-density concrete of the exact formulation used in nuclear power plants, meeting NATO standard blast and ballistic protection levels. The construction process displaces 45,000 cubic meters of soil, a number that gives you a visceral sense of the engineering scale involved. And the price range runs from $60 million to over $100 million depending on specifications and customization. Entry to an Oppidum bunker is through a hydraulically activated ramp that remains concealed in the landscape above, allowing vehicles to drive directly down into what the company calls the Parc Fermé, an underground garage built to bank vault and museum-grade anti-intrusion standards, designed to protect high-value vehicle collections in the same environment that protects the people who own them. From the garage, occupants pass through a decontamination airlock enclosed by two sets of custom blast doors, the outer one equipped with integrated biometric technology that scans face, iris, palm, and fingerprints simultaneously before granting entry. The interior is engineered specifically to neutralize the psychological distress of underground confinement, which turns out to be a significant design challenge when your clients are people who are accustomed to feeling powerful in their environments. The grand foyer features 16-foot ceilings and hardwood flooring lit by chandeliers engineered to mimic natural sunlight. Smart glass walls in the private meeting rooms transition from opaque to transparent, revealing an inner garden. Live plants and trees sustained by automated irrigation and full-spectrum LED skylights that simulate natural sunrises, sunsets, and seasonal shifts across a simulated year. There's a lap pool, a vault-grade art gallery for collections that might otherwise be vulnerable to the surface conditions the bunker is designed to outlast, and a private car gallery for vehicles that represent significant investment and that their owners are not inclined to leave unprotected above ground. Rising S Company, operating at the more accessible end of the luxury survival market, offers the aristocrat model at approximately $8.35 million. Structural plate steel with a 150-year corrosion coating, up to 10,000 square feet of configurable space, NBC air filtration, a bowling alley, shooting range, swimming pool, sauna, and home theater. Vivos operates at a different model entirely, having converted a former Soviet-era military installation in Germany called Europa 1 into a shared community bunker where private apartments start at $2 million and residents share access to a hospital, bakery, chapel, detention center, and seed bank spread across 5 kilometers of continuous mountain tunnels. The permits, the pipes, and the legal obstacle course. Building a genuinely self-sustaining underground ecosystem in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem is not simply a matter of having enough money and the right engineering firm, because the environmental sensitivity of the region means that subterranean development triggers a regulatory process that is considerably more complex than digging a hole and pouring concrete, and understanding that process illuminates why only a specific tier of wealth can realistically execute these projects. Underground fuel storage is the first significant regulatory hurdle, and it's a consequential one given that running a luxury compound off-grid for months or years requires substantial diesel reserves to power the generator systems that keep everything functioning. In Montana, any underground storage tank system with a capacity exceeding 110 gallons, which is essentially any system that matters for this purpose, falls under strict regulation by the Montana Department of Environmental Quality under the state's Hazardous Waste and Underground Storage Tank Program. A DEQ-approved installation permit must be secured at least 30 days before construction begins, and the tanks themselves must be double-walled steel or fiberglass equipped with continuous electronic leak detection, interstitial monitoring systems, and automatic overfill prevention valves, because a single leak in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem contaminates aquifers that feed into one of the most ecologically sensitive watersheds in North America, and generates the kind of liability and public attention that makes the entire project's anonymity strategy collapse. The Church Universal and Triumphant learned this lesson the hard way in 1990, when a massive 31,000-gallon diesel fuel spill from their bunker construction contaminated the local water table and turned the townspeople of Gardner and Livingston from confused neighbors into active opponents. A cautionary tale that serious modern developers are aware of, and that explains the extreme care that goes into the fuel storage specifications of current projects. Water sourcing requires its own regulatory navigation. A truly self-sufficient underground compound cannot rely on municipal water or shallow wells vulnerable to surface contamination, so developers sink deep private wells into artesian aquifers, a process that requires a beneficial water use permit from Montana's Department of Natural Resources and Conservation to secure the formal water right, alongside a notice of completion of groundwater development that establishes the legal claim to the water being accessed. Any construction near perennial streams, which in Paradise Valley means almost any significant construction, requires a 310 permit from the local conservation district, involving a joint on-site inspection by a conservation district representative and a Montana fish, wildlife, and parks biologist who assess the potential for soil erosion, riparian habitat disruption, and alteration of natural water flows. The atmospheric engineering inside the bunker itself reflects the threat environment these structures are designed to outlast. The ventilation systems run in dual-path configuration. Standard HEPA filtration during normal operations, instantly transitioning to military-grade CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, overpressure systems during emergency conditions. The overpressure mechanism is the critical detail here because it works by artificially raising the internal air pressure of the bunker above ambient external pressure, ensuring that any microscopic structural leaks push clean filtered air outward rather than drawing contaminated surface air inward. The power systems are similarly redundant. Large-scale industrial battery banks as primary backup, diesel generators as secondary backup, activating only when battery storage drops below a threshold, minimizing both fuel consumption and the thermal and acoustic signatures that might reveal an active underground installation to surface observation. The Profits Bunkers and the billion-dollar sequel. Now here is the wildest part about Paradise Valley that the mainstream media completely ignores. This has all happened here before, fast back to the late 1980s. Long before tech billionaires arrived, Paradise Valley was the global headquarters for a massive Doomsday cult led by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, affectionately known to her followers as Guru Ma. Guru Ma convinced her followers that nuclear apocalypse was coming. Her solution? She bought a massive 32,000-acre ranch right on the edge of Yellowstone and built a state-of-the-art $25 million underground fortress. But she didn't use Swiss engineers. She bought giant surplus industrial oil tanks, welded them together in massive ditches, and buried them under the dirt. Inside these metal tubes, they built an entire subterranean society, complete with dental clinics, industrial kitchens, and massive bunk rooms. On March 15, 1990, the exact day Guru Ma predicted the world would end, over 2,000 cult members sealed themselves inside, held their breath, and waited for the apocalypse. Spoiler alert, the world didn't end. Instead, their fuel tanks leaked into the water supply. The feds found an illegal weapons cache, and the cult collapsed. Just recently, one of those original 1980s cult bunkers went on the market for $888,000. A literal monument to the valley's original prepper past. But here's the twist. The cultists of 1989 and the tech elites of today are driven by the exact same psychological paranoia. They both share the absolute conviction that society is a house of cards, and the only rational response is to dig a hole and hide. The only difference? The cult used rusted oil tanks and religious prophecies. Today's elites use Swiss architects, military defense contractors, and $100 million budgets based on geopolitical risk modeling. The technology changed. The paranoia stayed exactly the same. Think about it for a second. The people who built the tech platforms you use every day, the financial systems that move global capital, and the supply chains that feed the world, are quietly investing hundreds of millions into fortified private states 50 feet beneath the Montana dirt. They understand the systems they built better than anyone else, and they've reached a terrifying conclusion about where those systems are headed. Paradise Valley isn't just beautiful ranch land anymore. It's where that conclusion lives in concrete and steel. And that's a wrap on this video. Let us know what you think in the comments, and if you want to keep tracking the hidden geography of extreme wealth, subscribe to Global Status because we're just scratching the surface. See you in the next one.